All right, you can begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. We are the second group to present, and the topic is understanding others. We invite you to give comments or to ask questions. This should be a very incorporative discussion. Thank you in advance for your time and for your attention.
Human family. I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious, some thrive on comedy, some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. The variety of our skin tones can confuse bemused delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the seven seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China. We weep on England's moors and laugh and moan in Guinea and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, good afternoon to you. In the grand scheme of human things, we are more alike than we are different. Finding common human purpose is where we should focus our perceptions of difference. In the poem we just heard, titled Human Family by Maya Angelou, describes all our uniquenesses as people that set us apart. But she concludes, we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. It is often said the best leaders are readers of people. These leaders have the intuitive ability to understand others by discerning how they feel and recognizing what they sense. In this presentation, we as a team, myself, Natasha Walker, and Anton Blackman, will facilitate this discussion on leadership with emphasis on Chapter 5, Understanding Others, from the book Exploring Leadership by Suzanne Comives and others. Now, this is a quote from John C. Maxwell. John C. Maxwell is a famous author. He's a motivational speaker, especially on the topic of leadership. Understanding people certainly impacts your ability to communicate with others. If you can learn to understand people, how they think, what they feel, what inspires them, how they are likely to act and react in a given situation, then you can motivate and influence them in a positive way. Therefore, we are saying understanding others is a necessity for effective leadership. There are some aspects to understanding others, and we're going to itemize them now. One aspect is individuality and commonality. In this respect, we speak about pluralism. A pluralistic group is a diverse one where its members subscribe to different things, yet tolerate each other's position, even when they do not match their own. Now, in any group setting, we tend to look around and see others or look for others who are like us. Finding people like us creates a feeling of association called social identity, which leads to the identification of subgroups. Take this group in particular. We would have started in 2019. At that time, it would have been 28 of us. Some of us strangers, some of us familiar with others. And in that group, each person would have either consciously or subconsciously looked for a commonality with someone sitting in that very said room. So, for example, in terms of sex, in our group, there are only 4 ladies, and now it comes down to 22 men. So perhaps one of those ladies may have stated, it only have man here, boy. Or on the reverse, men might say, wow, where are the women? As a matter of fact, the lecturers even noted this is a particular and peculiar group because usually we find in these courses of study more women or a half and half composition of women and men. Another commonality we may have looked for back then in September of 2019, let's say perhaps someone from the TTPS may look around and say, I wonder how much police is have here, boy. And then in your mind now, you tend to want to link up with somebody who you have some sort of association with. So let's go to the differences now. Coming out of that same group in 2019, there's a particular group that I want to put a focus on. They call themselves the Magnificent Seven. And in this group now, it's made up of persons from, of course, under the umbrella of national security. But there are in this group men from Coast Guard, there's a person from the Immigration Division, and the others from the TTPS. As a matter of fact, now they have I want to call it a visitor, or I don't know if he's included now, but a member from the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. And in that group, I want to argue that group has been the most cohesive group in all of the groups that we have. And that is because I will give credit to their leadership. In terms of beliefs, they will be different. Preferences, they will have different learning styles. The experiences, even though they had the same training, let's take, for example, the 2 guys from Coast Guard in that particular Magnificent Seven. They would have had the same training, but coming out of that training, they would still have different experiences. The personalities would be different. So some would be charismatic, some would be pragmatic, some would be quiet, different personalities. I wonder though, and possibly if someone from the group, I guess, could actually give us a little insight as to how it is they were able to stay together and function from since 2019 until now. Anybody at all from the group want to give a insight?
Yes, Natasha, I could
Who is this, Marvin?
Yes, this is Marvin.
Hi, Marvin.
Right. I could contest to that. I mean, yes, we did came together as a simple group of studying together, realized that we are basically better studying together. And what is noticed with our group, everybody have their strengths and their weaknesses, right? So where some may lag in certain areas, it will have others who have a better understanding of certain things, and they will actually, lead in that particular department, right? So it was 7 of us originally, right? So that's how we come up with the name, the Magnificent Seven. And then, we have an additional member, right? So, but he's there, right? So this is, diversity of different backgrounds and different leadership styles in many different ways, but our combination actually worked for us.
Thanks a lot, Marvin, for that contribution, because it actually is evident that you all are very effective. Pluralistic leadership is enhanced. Okay, thanks, Marvin. Pluralistic leadership is enhanced when a leader understands the team, appreciates diversity, and develops the skills to communicate across differences to come to a common understanding. Of course, we all know this individual. Now deceased, Dexter Black Stewart. And in his song, Same Way, I mean, we could all sing it. I wouldn't venture to sing because I'm sure in your minds now you're singing the song in your mind because it's one of his very effective songs. It says, if you cut me, you will see blood. If you squeeze me, you will feel the love. We are one people under the sun, one nation under the love. And I think this rendition sums up what we want to speak about in terms of individuality and commonality. But I ask the question, do we as leaders truly understand the message? What he's actually saying is that even though you are an individual, something binds you to everyone around you, no matter how different they may seem. Thus, the challenge of leadership is finding common ground from the vast differences that individuals bring to a situation. This challenge entails finding the purpose, vision, and common commitments that create a we from a group of individuals. So after we've examined our individuality and see where we are the same with other persons, we want to talk about diversity. What is diversity really? Now, we can have all definitions of diversity, but according to the Oxford Dictionary, diversity is the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, of different genders, sexual orientations, and so on. So now let's ask the question, why is diversity important? Well, as a leader, diversity sets the tone for your leadership. Traditionally, work processes and organizational culture are guided and influenced by a top-down approach. Leadership that does not embrace diversity cripples the true potential of the organization. Diversity, therefore, sets the tone for equity and inclusion. This, of course, we will discuss further into the presentation. Number two, leadership and diversity. Your employees want to feel included. The most viable asset in any organization is its human resource. With diversity and inclusion, employee engagement increases because they feel like they are part of the organization. In turn, productivity increases and employee turnover decreases. So numbers 1 and number 2 talks about the employee experience. And especially today, that's crucial because there's an overlap between your personal life and your work life. And from my experience and discourse with members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, this is true for them. So as a leader, you want to feel safe. And you want your members to feel safe. You want them to feel appreciated. You want them to feel valued and included in the workspace. And number 3, you have access to a range of thinking and creativity. In this respect, there's a wealth of resources in resolving problems and improvements in products and services. When you as a leader create a culture of acceptance, each individual is empowered to bring everything he or she has to work. No one is afraid that their point of view will be dismissed, so they can confidently share their ideas with the team. So after we've understood diversity, now let's go into different types of diversity. So this is a big one. We would have gone through it as a class from 2019. Perhaps every semester we'd have touched on gender bias. So now we're going to talk about gender diversity. Sex or gender? Is there really a difference? I want to say to you that in the 17th century, that's around the time of Shakespeare, sex and gender had the same meaning. However, in this 21st century, there is a distinction. Sex roles pertain to biology. Example, reproductive system and muscle mass. Gender roles, however, are socially constructed expectations which use terms like masculine and feminine. As leaders, we must be aware of and acknowledge the difference between these two. As a leader, it's important to ask yourself, how does my gender influence my attitudes and my behaviors? Or how have my experiences shaped my perspectives? So still on the topic of gender diversity, I want you to go back in your mind while I'm speaking and think of the games that we played as children. For some of us, it might be a way back. For some of us, just the other day, but think about it. From the time we were born, we were socialized into gender roles through things like colors, clothing, toys, chores, and so on. And even though modern thinking parents try to steer their children away from these stereotypes, other socialization agents like peers, television, and social media reinforce traditional gender messages. Let's take a look at how our leadership style may be shaped from the games we played as children. So I like anybody in class could speak and tell me some of the games, think back to when you were a child, that you boys would have played. Any person.
Marble
Marble
pitch.
pitch.
Sorry, I heard Juma and Marvin, I think.
Karen. Marble
Karen,
pitch.
thank you. Marble pitch. Any other games that boys would have played?
Football.
Thank you. So marble pitch, football,
Basketball.
basket. Woo, you got a quote by you. Okay, nice. Boys, any other games that boys would have played?
Catch and rescue.
Catch and rescue. What about the video games?
Yeah, that as well.
So
Correct.
let's think back to the 90s or so. I remember boys used to play Mrs. Pac-Man and Pac-Man. Yeah?
Mhm.
Yes? Okay, nice.
Yeah, we used to play gun shooting as well too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Caps gun and water gun.
I guess that's why you are where you are. No problem. So we look at it. So bear in mind those games that boys played. And look at the category on your left. So the games were rough and tumble. There was a natural hierarchy. Even if you played a video game which was indoors, it was seek and annihilate the enemy. In those games, you shout commands. Nobody will say, well, Jason, pass the ball for me now. Or Marvin, man on your back. No. Man on your back. Pass the ball. Look. The games were highly competitive. Winning or losing is important in these games. And from these games, the writers argue that boys learn to be tough, objective, unemotional, and competitive. So let's look at some games that girls would have played. Anybody? It doesn't have to be a girl answer, no? Anybody? Think of a games girls would have played.
Moral.
Moral, correct. Hopscotch. All your sisters, nice. Hopscotch. They would have played, if I may, Dolly House. Games like Hands of a Lady Fans, Mother May I, Doctor House. So let's look at those games now. In those games now, we can see they were in calm settings. There was order. In those games, especially like Moral and Hopscotch, they were all inclusive. Everybody got a turn. Mommy Bushu. Wow, Marvin, you went far. Mommy Bushu. The settings were small. They were intimate. They were sociable. The girls were, in the games, you had to suggest or you request, so Mother May I. These games were, the stress or the emphasis was non-competition. Yes, they were competitive at times, but that wasn't the emphasis. As well as the emphasis was not on winning or losing. And coming out of that now, girls learn to be polite, caring, emotional, and supportive. So, to understand how men and women have come to be as they are, we can learn from the patterns they develop as children. Now, my experience as a girl was different. So, of course, I'm going, as Darren said, with what is taught in the book. Traditional leadership expectation is a masculine one that states leaders should be decisive, in charge, competitive, and self-reliant. So now let's consider the social learnings. In your mind, think, have these games influenced our leadership styles? And of course, we have masculine leaders. Of course, we went before to say that masculine doesn't mean man. So going on that premise now, we have masculine leaders. And the takeaway is that they seek and value independence. Now, of course, just to clarify, they are women. So we consider that style of leadership masculine, even though we're going with gender, right? And feminine leaders seek and value intimacy. That's according to Tannen in 1990. So now I would have beforehand asked for permission to call these persons' names, so I'm going to do this. In this MGPS program, I have been noticing leaders, and I want to speak about two gentlemen and their styles of leadership. So let's talk about Jason. Jason, you're still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Now, Jason's style, this is my opinion, is more independent. And let's talk about my colleague, Anton. Anton now adopts a more inclusive style of leadership. So with Jason, as the group is formed, think of it, anybody who's been in a group with Jason, as the group is formed, he takes charge. He delegates tasks. Anton, however, we will opt for consensus and inclusion. However, it has also been my experience that these two gentlemen have switched their styles of leadership. There have been times that Anton will take charge and you will wonder, wow, okay. And Jason now will say, okay, what do you guys think? I mean, throughout the experience, yes. And he will leave it up to the group or for somebody to emerge to say, well, this is what we want to do. So I want to say that their two styles have been effective to suit the circumstances. So let me reiterate. Leadership must be relative to the setting and the situation. Let's talk about intimacy in terms of feminine leaders. Intimacy is a key component regarding connection in which individuals negotiate multifaceted works of friendship, minimize differences, try to reach consensus, and value the appearance of superiority, which would highlight differences. So don't think that when they say that you're intimate style leader, it means that you're a woman. Remember, we talk about masculine and feminine. In a world of status, however, independence is key. And I want to see this as particularly in terms of military and what we say paramilitary, because primary means of establishing status is to tell others what to do. And taking orders is a marker of low status. Still on the topic of understanding gender diversity. So we're looking at these images here. We have Who's the Boss, Daddy Daycare, Senior Warrior Princess, and G.I. Jane. Is there any person who's not familiar with any of these shows or movies? I take your silence as everybody's familiar. So let's talk about these movies. What can we say about Who's the Boss? Anyone want to take a dab at it? We're talking about gender here. All right. But Who's the Boss? Tony Danza, who played the role of Tony in the movie, he took on the role that was traditionally seen as the role of a woman. So he was the housekeeper, he was the caregiver for the children. In Daddy Daycare, starring Eddie Murphy, it was a group of men who decided to run a daycare for children. Tina Warrior Princess, of course. And I remember in my time growing up, boys used to love to watch the show. It was only when I got older I realized why. And of course, the now famous or infamous G.I. Jane. So let me ask the question, and I want to ask this question especially of the men. Let's look at Daddy Daycare. You all ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. So with Daddy Daycare, as I described the movie, you as a man, who's the person that answered? Sorry, because I can't see the names.
Marvin.
Okay, thank you, Marvin. Of course, everybody else could put in too, right? Which, you as a man, would you send, and I'm being specific here, your baby girl, let's say she's 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, to a daycare that is run solely by men? Would you?
Personally, no.
Okay, before we continue, is there anybody else that wants to chime in on this? Anybody who says no, yes, whatever they want to say? Any person, any other person, men in particular?
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say no.
But Tasha, I would say, for me, I am no. I wouldn't send my girl child in a daycare predominantly run by men. I wouldn't.
So far it seems that the consensus, can I just take a consensus? It seems that, so is there anybody at all who disagrees and says that, yeah, man, I certainly, man, have his qualifications, his daycare right next to the home, he seems to be a good father. Is there anybody that says that they will send their baby girl to a daycare run by men? Anybody at all from the men? Okay, good. So we can say the consensus is no. So of the men who spoke, can you tell me why you all wouldn't send your baby girl to this daycare run by men?
I think for me is and it coming out with a gender bias, you know. For me, you're expecting that to take care of this little girl, you're expectant of a mother figure and leaning more to feminine relationship than having a man changing the pampers and all of that. For me, that's how I see it. And I mean, there's a bias, but I mean, I have it. Yeah.
No problem, no problem. All opinions are accepted. Anybody else care to say why?
I think is eliminating risk.
Risk. Tell me. This is Darren, right? Tell me.
In your mind, you don't want to have to react to a situation. So you ain't putting yourself in that in the first place.
Okay, I get you. I get you, and I appreciate the fact that you're tempering it was because, of course, if we were in the classroom, we'll go into details to say what is what. But I want to say to you, I understand your points of view and I respect them. Personally, I agree. But I want to say to you as well that we're thinking of sex offenders, we're thinking of pedophiles, but isn't it so that if you check the Children's Authority records, there are women who are also pedophiles and sex offenders? Isn't that so? Anybody care to disagree? Good. So I take it as consent. However, in our minds, in our society, we have constructed this image that caregiving and nurturing is reserved for women. And the fact that as a society, we continue to observe differences speaks to the power of relationships that continue to exist, given a higher status to the traditional expectation of leadership. However, remember we talk about leadership and gender diversity. History has proven that both men and women are capable of making good decisions, leading effectively, being responsible group members, and communicating effectively. It is just that they may go about doing these things differently than the other sex would. This too, my classmates, lends to leadership. So on the topic of coming out from gender, let's talk about cultural diversity. And in culture now, we talk about ideas, customs, beliefs, and norms. Basically, culture encompasses everything about how a group of people think, how they feel, and how they behave. It's a pattern of knowledge. It's a common body of understanding. So let me ask this question now. Because remember, so far I love the discourse, thank you very much. Have you ever noticed that in different sections in the same organization, there are different cultures? So when I show this out to someone in the class, think about, okay, so let me ask someone who probably would have not moved from a section to a section, probably from one location geographically to another. Anybody care to take the mic?
Yes, Tash, I could relate to that.
Okay.
Well, then I think by now everybody in this class knows that I'm Tobagonian. So I moved from the Tobago division and came to Costart in 2019. And because of COVID, I was assigned to the Southern division. For some good reason or the other, the chief didn't send me back to Tobago to work. And yes, I would have noticed then. It's one Trinidad and Tobago fire service. You would think that the organization culture and the policies are the same, but you know, sitting at the divisional administration in the Southern Division, I had to really rethink some of the things that I learned over the years in the service. I mean, in Tobago, and how they were really applied in the Southern Division. Not to say that they were wrong, but some of the approaches to me were very different. Although we would think that the organizational culture supposed to be the same. And just for example, I would tell you, as a senior administrative officer, you are expected to provide minutes on files that would help the other senior officers
more.
and the chief
Go
officer
ahead,
to
take it.
make decisions, right? And boy, that style of writing minutes and putting that information was quite different in South from what I am accustomed to in Tobago. You know, some of the things that I've learned in Tobago coming to South, some of these steps were particularly missing, and I'm saying, but this is how this is to be done, and they skipped a lot of steps, which usually end up in problems when you have to make a decision when information is not forthcoming. So usually some of these things have to come back, and more important now, I had to fit in our organizational culture where the other two divisional heads were above me because I was, let's say, third in command on the operational side. And when you have the division, the administrative, the executive head, and the divisional head accustomed to this type of process, it is very difficult for them to adapt to a new one. So I remember with one particular guy, I had to indicate to him because he kept sending back my minutes, and I used to tell him, so the minute right after mine is yours. So if you don't agree, you could say that. And he had some trouble with that. But I understand what you say, that I kind of live it for that 6 months that we were out for thing. But I did reflect on it. I did some adaptation, and we got along well.
Very, very nice. Thanks for that, God. It comes to mind
If
for
I
me.
may,
Sure.
yeah, if I may, I'll put him a little 2 cents. For God was from Tobago to Trinidad, and my experience would have been with the culture change would have been from Trinidad to Tobago as an operator in Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard working in upstream back in 2006. It would have been a difficult change for me and a culture shock as well. Uh, before I never really visited the island as much before. So being an operational officer and going to Bago is totally different. Whereas if you have a missing vessel or you have to do a research on a particular vessel, it is easy to make a phone call to call all the different ports or ports of entry, and ask the harbor master to make a check on this port to see if he locate the vessel. However, in Tobago, that is impossible, right? So the only port of entry is, in Scarborough there, and the other ports, meaning all the fishing depots and these things, you have to physically go because there is no one you can actually call, right? I don't know if things change now, right? And like for us in Trinidad, stores and things will remain open, food stores and stuff will remain open, all 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock and thing in the night, during the week. But for Tobago, it's different. If you get sick 9 o'clock in the night and you're looking to find a job, so open, crap will smoke your pipe because everything closed.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, that was a culture shock until it took me a while to actually to adapt the way how to do things in Tobago. Right. I must also add that meeting the fishermen also out at sea in Tobago is totally different from meeting fishermen out at sea in Trinidad.
Right.
Right. So with Trinidad, they get a little more hostile. With Tobago, you get plenty more friendly. And they actually happy and glad to actually see Coast Guard out there and thing, and that's how we was able to gather a lot of information based on certain things. So yeah, the
Right.
culture is really, really different.
Yeah, because of course we all understand and appreciate the culture in Trinidad, and between Trinidad and Tobago is totally different. So let's talk now about cultural intelligence. So as leaders now, you need to be cognizant of certain factors, because you're going to be sometimes you might be thrust into a position where you're leading people that you're not accustomed to. So as a leader now, you need to recognize the existence of diverse cultures, foster an atmosphere for different cultures. You need to acknowledge expressions as valid. You need to value all contributions. You need to empower the different groups now to contribute and celebrate differences. Why? Leaders should possess cultural intelligence, and we call it CQ. And this is the ability, just like we have IQ, we have cultural intelligence, and this comprises the cognitive, emotional, and physical. This is the ability to use reasoning and observational skills to interpret situations and use appropriate behavioral responses. So let's talk about, in terms of cultural diversity, let's talk about empathy. A leader must have empathy. So empathy simply is communicating and understanding differences. So I want to take us back to, I think 3 weeks ago, with the same issue with Will Smith. I think he's popular, where Theo would have been the person to give his contribution. He, to my mind, he was empathizing with Will Smith's situation. He was saying, I'm not saying what he did was right, but to understand. So as a leader now, when you're trying to understand the perspective of others, it goes better in terms of the dynamics of the group and the productivity of the group. In terms of productivity speaks about persons that come together and bring diversity to high performing teams. And for me, I must say, in my almost 3 years with this MGPS class, I have always been on a team that was high performing. And I will credit that to diversity and inclusion. I never felt as though, well, okay, she's a woman, so nah. It was always what you could bring, how we can make this work together. Let's go to innovation. Innovation speaks about a variety of perspectives to foster innovative thinking and creativity. In this particular MGPS class, there's a group of soldiers who I would say always bring it. They always have, for presentations, video productions. And the very last presentation they have done, Mr. BC, you missed out, I have to tell you. In that group, it comprised some members of the TTPS and the Defense Force. And for me, these presentations were the most memorable. Problem solving. Challenges are layered, so having people with different backgrounds can add to better problem solving with the richness of opinions. So you might decide, okay, well, we had a problem like this where I came from, and this is how we deal with it. So the group could look at any leader now as the person out to decipher and to discern, okay, at the end of the day, this is what we're going to do. Let's talk about opportunity. With opportunity, diversity opens the door to new opportunities. The blending of ideas, which would have otherwise been the same, boring, monotonous, homogeneous thing. Coming from cultural diversity, you want to look now at international diversity. And simply, international diversity refers to diversity among cultures of different countries. And we're talking about food, language, values, customs, and religious beliefs. In understanding international diversity, leaders must consider knowledge, which leads to understanding, and then to inclusion. Understanding international diversity can be rewarding and exciting. In the same way, it can be a challenge for leaders to navigate their way through this experience. For success, of course, as I said before, this is what leaders need to exercise. So in an interdependent world, remember we are now a one small world as opposed to before, where we, in terms of technology, we are connected. Leaders need to know about cultural differences and similarities. Understanding would come out of knowledge. So as the knowledge increases, the understanding will increase. And of course, now the ideas and methods can be used to achieve optimal productivity. Inclusion. Remember, we're speaking about diversity. Every individual's culture can be added as valuable to the group. So an effective leader is one who encourages integration of these values. And in so doing, he or she will foster an environment of respect and appreciation. Okay. TTPS. Is there any person from the TTPS here still paying attention? Or thank you for your focus. Let's talk about these two gentlemen. So on your left, you have Jack Iwatsky. He was the former Deputy Commissioner of Police to the TTPS. And then on the right, we have Dwayne Gibbs. He was a former top cop. And they would have served a short period in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I would say short in terms of leadership in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, eventually, I'm imagining that they would have met with some obstacles. But is there by chance any person here from the TTPS who's willing to tell us about shortly about their experience with being under the leadership of these two gentlemen? Any person at all? Okay, so let me speak then. In terms of when they were here, I remember that there were issues with an aircraft in terms of Mr. Iwatsky. I remember hearing from my fellow members or friends from the TTPS that they saw their coming to Trinidad and Tobago as taking us back to colonial days. So there were issues of race, ethnicity. There were issues that, okay, as a police officer, I would have joined coming as a recruit as a young fella, and I'm working my way up to that top position. And lo and behold, you come now with your ideologies and your different ways of doing things and try to force your dogma on us. Eventually, as we said before, they would have had to leave. They decided, let me be correct, to leave Trinidad and Tobago for personal reasons. However, we got this clip from the CBC from Bruce McFarlane. He was the former Deputy Justice Minister in Manitoba, Canada. And he was saying, and I quote, "I saw that he was constantly under the gun in the country to which he went, and he was seen as an outsider." That's always a tough one to respond to. And when I read this quote, I was thinking also of Gary Griffith. Now, for Gary Griffith, there was no international diversity, but it comes back to cultural diversity in terms of Gary Griffith would have come from a military background. He would have been in the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, and then coming now to the TTPS. And I'm sure that he also would have encountered issues in terms of transitioning into the culture. So I continue reading from Bruce McFarlane, sorry. "You don't really understand the community. You're applying principles from another country, and that's not going to work." So in a sense, it's tough. So I know there are times that members of the Defense Force will have to go and perform duty in other countries. For example, when St. Vincent had the volcano threatening, there was a time in Haiti. So I want to say to us as leaders, when we go to these different countries, we have to bear in mind that our way may not be the way. However, discourse and communication is key, because at the end of the day, we want to all achieve the same goal. We should also always look for that common purpose. We should also look for that common ground and try to understand the persons of the different countries that we will go to. And of course, vice versa. So that sort of was a negative, fairly negative example of international diversity. Let's look at this one. Of course, here, I'm sure everyone is familiar with these products. This is Cool. So we have the Cool Cola Champagne product. Now, in case you don't know, this name has been changed. So you see the bottle on the left, it's Cola Champagne, and the one on the right is Cola Champion. And this product, sorry, is manufactured by SM Jaleel & Company Limited. And that is, the owners of that company are Muslims. However, they issued a statement in September of 2020 saying that they changed the name from Cola Champagne to Cola Champion because to keep in tandem with their corporate image. The background to that story is this. SM Jaleel & Company markets their products throughout the world, especially of the Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean. And they wanted at that time to penetrate the Arab world to get their products into that market. So in a meeting, they had a sit down with a team from Saudi Arabia. And the members of the team said to them, evaluate products. They went through all this stuff. They went through the different things they had. And they said, but this particular flavor name, we have an issue with. Because Muslims are not supposed to, they're forbidden to consume alcohol. Now, we in Trinidad and Tobago know that Cola Champagne is not alcohol. It's a soft drink. But in terms of embracing international diversity, the leadership of SM Jaleel & Company saw it fit to change the name. Now imagine for years we'd have seen this product. And of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, we embrace other cultures, we embrace Other religions, we embrace their food, we consider their values and so. So since I was a girl, I know about cocoa. And I'm sure many of us here will know about it. And nobody ever voiced an objection to it. But because they wanted to be inclusive in terms of the Saudi Arabian market, they decided to change the name. Now, that leads us to now building multiculturalism. In building multiculturalism, we talk about multicultural appreciation. So for decades, as I said, SM Jalil has produced the cola champagne flavor soft drink. Is it that they just converted to Islam? No. It's due to the fact that in TNT, like I said, there's an acceptance of other cultures and other religions. In so much that we live as one. So you have in Trinidad and Tobago, it's truly a melting pot. People say that America is, it's not. America is like a salad bowl because you can still see the lettuce from the tomato, from the cucumber. But in Trinidad and Tobago, you have children who are not of a particular religion and go to those other schools. So children who are non-Catholics, for example, can go to Catholic schools. So we have a perfect example of multicultural appreciation. To be effective as leaders, we must strive to build multicultural appreciation for respective domains. And to take us further into this discussion, I want to invite my colleague, well-abled, Anton, to continue. Anton? Tanya might be off because we can't hear you.
Afternoon, sir. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I believe that and trust that you all are hearing me clearly.
Yes, we hear you now.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay. Are you all seeing a slide entitled Building Multicultural Appreciation?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, Tasha. Building multicultural appreciation is a first process in understanding others. The key to understanding others is developing an appreciation for the various cultural diversity that we as leaders may encounter. The relational leadership model emphasizes, firstly, the relationship among other people when leading an organization. It speaks to values like inclusion, empowerment, and purposefulness. To be an effective leader, it requires us to know more, firstly, about developing that openness and the appreciation for different aspects from different and varying cultures. This ability to accept and work with another strongly add value, not only to us as individuals, but we as members of the protective services, we work in groups. And it's key that we function as one. And to do that, we must appreciate different persons' ideas and perspectives. Can anyone assist me in actually filling in the blanks here? Just to jog your memory a bit, it's a famous, it's an excerpt from a famous song by Johnny King.
Appreciation. Taking a jump at it.
Appreciation? Yep.
Appreciation.
That's all right, Solomon?
Yeah, appreciation.
Yeah, correct. I'm sure that all of us would have looked at the 2021 awards, national awards, and I am quite sure as well that members of the TTPS would have indeed been proud to see one of their former colleagues, a former member of the TTPS, Mr. Johnny King, receiving the Hummingbird Silver Medal for its contribution to music. Now, this song, Appreciation, this excerpt, Appreciation, based on the human mind, everyone needs some for happiness all the time. Because it's important, we are strive to live. Everyone's on the hunt. Every man ought to give generously. Appreciation, everybody needs some. Johnny King. Building multicultural appreciation involves leaders developing the awareness, knowledge, and skills to be able to work effectively in an environment that have a variety of multicultural influences. When we speak about appreciation, we talk about us as individuals recognizing and enjoying those good qualities of someone and moving away essentially from our stereotypes and from our biases. Awareness and increasing our awareness talks about the ability for us to firstly understand and appreciate the history, the various life experiences and beliefs of our diverse group. Once that first level of awareness is created, the individual will tend to want to gain knowledge. And this knowledge focuses on him understanding the concepts of these diverse groups. And when we talk about knowledge, we talk about learning. So the individual attempts to gather information, to gather data, he reads, he inquires, and through life experiences, he gains that knowledge of these different groups. In building this appreciation, he develops skills. And when we speak about skills, we talk about the capabilities or the proficiencies that he developed. And these proficiencies are used not only for the development of the leader or for the individual, but for him to foster that relationship and appreciation with other members through his hands-on experiences. Now, there are several models which speak to the processes that an individual may undergo to build this multicultural appreciation. And to look at one of these models speaks about the intellectual learning process model. The intellectual learning process is a process which we find ourselves integrating cultural diversity. It is a way of understanding that in groups we may have differences, but we have to function in order to maintain that mutual respect and to actually allow individuals to maintain their individuality. And in doing that, it promotes harmony, it promotes peace within not only your group or your organization, but in society as a whole. When you're just intellectual learning, it adds value by inculcating basic principles of empathy, open-mindedness, respect, and inclusivity. David Hoops, in his intellectual learning process model, identifies 4 processes or stages that we as individuals go through. The first stage speaks to ethnocentrism. In this stage, we believe that our own culture, our own way of doing things is superior, is best. Following ethnocentrism, us as individuals transition. And when we talk about transition, if we look at ourselves as we develop, human beings grow through physical changes, emotional changes, mental changes, and we also go through cultural and psychological changes. Coming out of ethnocentrism, we look at stage 2, which speaks to us developing an awareness. Once an awareness is developed, we move to stage 3, understanding, and our final stage, acceptance. So let's look at these 4 stages in a bit more detail. Ethnocentrism. It speaks to the human survival response that tells us that our culture is the best. Individuals at this stage may exhibit intolerance and outright hostility or aggression towards other cultures. In most cases, individuals who are stuck in this stage, they tend to impose their will on others. Awareness. Awareness is the first step out of ethnocentrism. It's actually the first step in the transition process. We can only transition based on our experiences. And once we gain the appreciation for other people's culture, we move out of that ethnocentric stage, and our awareness is raised. To do this, we must acknowledge that the existence of many different cultures. Individuals at this stage become aware that the differences are not personal, but the differences are recognized as being entrenched in other person's individual culture and beliefs. And we as individuals, we as leaders, we must be able to give way and think and act in a manner that lets the member know that we recognize and we are aware and we are moving forward. Understanding, the third stage. Only when awareness grows, our culture will grow. So we move from some level of understanding that derives from our personal experiences. We understand through acquiring information and knowledge. And the individual now begins to put the pieces together. So we begin to say, oh, okay, I understand. Or I see value. Or the person did that or did this for this particular reason. The model goes on to speak about the transition process, acceptance. Coming out of understanding, we now validate that the culture that exists is okay. We believe that we have a live or let live attitude. So we embrace other person's culture. We feel that individuals in that group or that setting are worth investing our time, are worth being able to gain their trust, gain their ideas, understand their culture, see the benefits, and build that homogeneous group. Transition steps. Hoops spoke extensively about the transition steps that we as individuals continue to go over time. Understanding and appreciating the diversity in culture is a complex process. One begins to understand that cultures have strengths and weaknesses. This understanding leads to an appreciation and a valuing of certain aspects of other person's culture. And once we begin to appreciate and value other culture, we as individuals undergo a change. So we move from objectivity, which is holding on to our personal stereotype and our personal biases, to subjectivity, where we consider certain aspects of other person's cultural beliefs and background in terms of our own identity and values. So we actually assess and look at person's culture with a view of recognizing, hey, though we are diverse, in the opening cell, we say that we are different, but more alike. We could still look at someone's culture and see value and identify values that we as individuals can use. The second step in the transition process speaks to selective adoption. In this stage, the individual tries and adopts new attitudes and behaviors from other cultures which he believes are useful and desirable to emulate. Aspects of another culture which have value and worth to the individual personally are integrated into his or her way of thinking, feeling, or acting. The final stage or step from ethnocentrism takes us straight to multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is basically an ideal state. And though these three processes or these three steps are identified individually, multiculturalism is an ongoing process. It involves you as an individual being able to feel comfortable when navigating in groups, when navigating in the workplace, when navigating at home or in the community, effectively in various situations. Multiculturalism speaks to the individual being open to new experiences. Let's talk. Based on whose model, the intellectual learning process model, how useful do you think the concepts of the intellectual learning process model can be for us as officers understanding our young budding officers, aka Generation Z? Anyone?
Well, Anton, I'd like to contribute something here. I'd like to make an attempt, right? So, yeah, so the concepts of this model, right, could definitely be applied by us when interacting with our subordinates, right, especially of the Generation Z that you mentioned, right? As we go through the 4 stages, ethnocentrism, right? So understand that based on what you said, you know, that means that we basically see our culture, our way as the best way. You know, that's the way we know. So, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, the young officers coming into the service, you know, that would be our concept first, that hey, they don't have a clue, they don't know how to operate, and what we know is the best way, right? And then to transition into the second stage, which is that of awareness, you know, acknowledging that, okay, these young people today have a particular way of operating, and you know, in order to really get the best out of them, you know, we need to begin to at least become aware of how they operate. All right, and then move into stage 3, which is understanding. So, you know, based on our regular continued interaction with them, we would actually begin to understand, you know, a bit of the culture, a bit of the, you know, the talk, the lingo, the slang of the of the young people now, you know, and start to understand their way of thinking.
Correct.
Right? Which would take us to the final stage of acceptance. All right, in the 4 stages where, okay, we accept the validity of their culture, so to speak, you know, coming into the service without comparing or without judging, you know, without judging them and saying, okay, you know, we are much better than them, or our generation is much better than their generation. No, at this stage of acceptance, we come to accept that, hey, you know, these young people are the way they are, and we're not trying to compare their way of thinking with ours, so we're not trying to judge them.
Yeah, excellent, excellent, Jason. right? One thing though, now that we have passed through that process as leaders, following that, following the process, we must try to not only to understand, but to integrate those new perspectives and those new ideas of the Generation Z into a beneficial aspect for the organization. You know, the talk about Generation G as being tech savvy and information at the tip of the fingers. So we tap on that resource. And my colleague earlier spoke about human resource being the backbone of any organization. So we as leaders, following the intergenerational process model, we must integrate these young officers into our organization to the benefit of all. But excellent contribution, Jason. Thanks. So now that we have gained that understanding and trust, we must be able to treat with differences that may occur. To treat the differences, we have to realize that it's a complex, it's a developmental experience. A large part of understanding others is actually how we view persons who are different from ourselves. And there are studies and the evidence to suggest that this developmental process, which we move to 3 basic phases. And if you look at us as growing up as a child, we are completely unaware. To some degree, we just accept. But as we grow to adult, we mature, we get to see the world through different gender and cultural lenses, and we gain an appreciation. We mature. The same attitude has to be applied when dealing with differences in culture. To talk a little bit more about this experience, we want to talk about the Riddle scale. The Riddle scale, named after its creator, psychologist Dorothy Riddle, was originally developed as a scale for homophobia. And in reading through this chapter, I actually want to, I can actually relate to the different stages. I hope that when we go through that, you all gain an appreciation, because it's actually real life. Now, each stage that psychologist Dorothy Riddle identifies, it talks about a term which is associated with some attitudes and belief that we hold strong to. She speaks to 8 stages in 2 separate categories. The first 4 stages of the scale speaks about that the individual having a negative attitude. And the second group of stages speaks to positive attitude coming out of that awareness and that knowledge and that development of skills. So the Riddle scale was also known as the Riddle homophobia scale, or Riddle scale of homophobia. It was designed as a psychometric scale that measured the degree to which a person is or is not homophobic. During the first 4 stages, which represents negative levels of attitude, she identifies repulsion. And before I actually go into the details, I want you all to cast your mind back to at least the last 10 years to now, and assess your feeling, your emotion to persons with different sexual orientation, different sexual preferences. And in your own, after I concluded this particular slide, I want you to tell me if there were any changes from then to now in terms of how you feel about persons' sexual preference or sexual preference. So Dorothy Riddle, she spoke about repulsion. And in this stage, people who are perceived to be different are seen as strange, sick, or even crazy. And I know for myself, I know for me, when I actually looked at my thoughts and my feelings 10 years ago about homosexuality and sexual preferences, I actually was repulsed. I don't know about you guys, but that was just my personal view at the time, my perspective at the time. And I really did view these changes to be abnormal. And these people were far from being part of the mainstream populace. The second stage, she speaks about level, she identifies pity. So in the pity stage, people who are different are somehow, we say that people who are different, they are somehow born that way. So they're born that way, so I feel sorry for them. So in this stage, we try to help those individuals to reinforce normal behavior. So we feel that, hey, we could fix them. So we try to reinforce our bias onto these individuals. The third stage speaks to tolerance. And in tolerance level, we actually see the differences are just a phase. And I myself, in going through this, like I said, I went through this exact phase. I remember my initial conversation with someone who was a homosexual. And I actually thought that they're just going through a phase. And just as Ms. Ruler said, they'll grow out of it. All right. So thus one could protect, and thus us as an individual in the tolerance level, we try to protect them. And we tolerate their decisions, similar to how we do a child. We say, okay, they don't know better. So let's nurture, let's protect them. And the final phase in the negative level, we talk about acceptance. And we will say acceptance is a good thing. But in this particular scale, it implies that one needs to make accommodation for another differences. So we accommodating them in the sense that we acknowledging that they are different, but we still holding on to our own bias, our own stereotype. Coming out of the negative levels, based on our experiences and our knowledge gained, we begin to support. And in the supporting level, we work to safeguard the rights of those who are different. And clearly, we can see the world is trending, especially as it relates to homophobia and sexual orientation. There are so much human rights groups. There are currently legislation being passed to support these individuals in their choices. In some cases, these individuals are admired. Right? There's an acknowledgement that being different in our society takes strength. So we have the gay pride marches, and we have persons who are not part of the LGBTQ community giving and lending support and coming out in admiration of these persons and recognizing that, hey, to do this, it actually takes a level of strength of character. So one is willing to truly look at oneself and work on one's own personal biases. The third level, appreciation, it talks about us valuing the diversity of people. And we are willing to confront insensitive attitudes. The final level speaks about nurturance, and it views differences with genuine affection and delight, and is willing to be an advocate of those differences. Now, the Ritter scale was ideally, as I said before, it was actually drafted as a scale to treat homophobia. But the scale was found beneficial in studies of intellectual learning. So us as individuals in organizations, in our communities, we too, when dealing with diversity, we too, when dealing with culture and attitudes, we too go through these stages. And as individuals, we must be able to recognize our own personal biases. We must be able to recognize the influence of culture. We must be able to recognize that when we perceive things, we're looking through different lenses, be it cultural or otherwise, and work to the benefit of the organizations and to the community at large. Cultural influences of leadership behavior. It is useful to examine the range of human behaviors that are essential in the leadership setting. Because as leaders, we too are actually prone to biases, which are actually based on our social environment, and in most cases is based on our culture. An awareness of how aspects of our diversity, and I believe in the first presentation earlier, in Natasha's presentation, we talk about aspects of diversity, sex, race, ethnicity, and age that can influence our own behavior and that of other members in the group. No group is actually homogeneous. We as individuals with our own perspective, we have different personality preferences. We have different attitudes, different styles. Our value system may vary. Our beliefs and even our opinions. But they all have one common thread. And that common thread is our cultural influences. London and Rosen, they stated that relational leadership seeks not only to change the very culture of the organization or group, but ideally it seeks to use that diversity as a true asset to the organization. And I believe that us as individuals, that's something we should aspire to. For far too long, us as leaders or middle managers, we are prone to not recognizing that the differences that exist are not actually differences, but the differences are actually culturally based. And by us gaining that knowledge and awareness of other person's culture, it can make us better make us better leaders. Part of the leadership process speaks to communication. And communication is actually essential because just about everything that we do in life is enhanced by being a more effective communicator. But communication involves more than just writing skills or talking skills. Communication reaches or encompasses a volume of ideas. In our MGPS group, there are different styles and different modes of communication. And the effectiveness of these styles depends on the individuals within that group. So in every class, in every semester, we were actually placed in groups. I know my colleagues and them would bear me out. And within the groups, there are different, you will observe a range of different behaviors. Some members will be reclusive, some will be very vocal, some will be very quiet. And we must understand how to communicate effectively with these varying levels of individuals. When you look at communication, being part of the national security arm, members of the defense force, members of the fire service, members of the police service, we have our own culture. And Wood, 2004 in his writing, he recognizes these individual organizational culture, group cultures, he called them speech communities. And he referred to a speech community as a group that shares norms And they actually have their own jargons, and they actually have their own specific purpose. Now, us as leaders, we must be mindful of speech communities, because persons outside our speech community who are not aware of our jargons, who are not aware of our jokes, who are not aware of our lingo, may at times tend to be offended. So us as leaders, us as members of different organizations, even in the group setting, when we interact, we too have to be mindful that, hey, I come from a specific speech community. So if, as a fire officer, if I would say fire priority, then my comrades in the general fire service will instantly know what we're speaking about. Or if in my particular speech community, I would say I rank as fire station officer. Members of the Defense Force or TTPS may not understand that jargon. All right. So we as members, we as boarding leaders, we must be able to recognize the benefits and the potential issues that may arise. When you talk about communication, you talk about verbal and non-verbal communication. And non-verbal communication plays a critical part. We communicate by gestures, eyes, touch, in a non-verbal way. But these methods of communication are actually actually reflects our values, our perspectives, our norms, and our heritage. Another process that leaders may tend to go through is conflict and conflict resolution. Within our various organizations, you might observe individuals with a range of behaviors, from the confrontational to the subtle. There are some who believe outright that, hey, you're going on my way is right, and I don't really want to hear you. Whereas there are others who value that connection, who want to sit, who want to reason, who would understand that, hey, there are other persons in the room with opinions, and yes, they do matter. For us as relational leaders, conflict resolution is a critical aspect. Almost all change effort will involve some degree or some level of conflict. We must stay focused on the purpose. We must also strive to maintain that positive relationship with others. And at the same time, we must also remain ethical and promote inclusion. The final process I want to speak about in terms of our leadership is decision making. When you talk about decision making, there are different styles that individuals may adopt, especially when in leadership or management positions. There are some who will value the majority rule. There were some that will value the minority opinion or the junior's opinion. And there are some who will want to sit, discuss, and gain consensus. Relational leadership requires communication skills that help us understand others and not just persuade them. Because in most cases, in reading a chapter, I could reflect that, I don't know if you're listening to me, some of you all in my jog your mind or jog your memory, that sometimes when we come across a issue or we have to make a decision, that we try to impose that decision on others. And we don't actually try or focus our attention in having them understand what the merits of decision or why decision was made. We try to persuade them, try to coax them. And they may say, yeah, I agree. But when they leave, they left not understanding how we came to the decision and what are the parameters under which the decision was made. So for us, especially members of the MGPS class going through the paces, we had to constantly ask ourselves, how do my perspective and my preference shade my view? We also have to ask, in what ways could I be understood more correctly and understand with greater insight? Now, these two questions call for introspection, and the mark of any good leader, especially one who's trying to understand others, we must undergo a process of introspection. We must step away from our stereotypes, and we must recognize our biases. I don't know, at this point in time, I would ask if anyone want to give a perspective on their communication in terms of if there was any situation where their perspective or the preference shade their view. Okay, moving on. Leadership and communication. For most of us individuals, hearing is a natural and almost automatic process. But listening, however, is a purposeful or purposive activity. It requires us to be intentionally mindful of the other person. And when we speak about listening and communicating in a pluralistic context, we talk about empathy. And empathy means you are using another person's standard and preference to understand that person's experience. Using empathy, if you are able to see yourself, you're using empathy if you're able to see yourself understanding the experience of others from their point of view. Imagine how they feel, connecting with the emotions that they experience when you're communicating. And ideally, this process is difficult, because I will ask the question, how many of us truly and genuinely communicate, put ourselves in the perspective of understanding the experiences that others may go through? How many of us actually imagine how that person feels and try to connect on an emotional level? So understanding others, though theoretically diverse, the process is complex. It's difficult. Relational empathy. Working effectively ideally requires emotional empathy. And emotional empathy goes way beyond merely just understanding another. It recognizes the importance of context. And it potentially changes habits and behaviors. And it actually has the potential to transform an organization's culture. To do that, it may mean that in our dialogue, in our goal of understanding others, we may have to create a new culture, a third culture, that actually unifies the position of the two individuals' perspective and cultures and contexts. This third culture of common context, potentially, according to Simons, can develop its own jargon, its own definition, its own vision and understanding. And in doing so, members form their own unique context that brings them together. The belief about the goodness of people guides how we approach others. And we have over our course of study, we have went through the self-fulfilling prophecy. And I know for myself, I have been guilty of that, especially during my tenureship in the MGPS class, being placed in certain groups. And I'm sure I'm not alone, that some persons may come out all right and say, that person, I want a person in a group because that person is a hard worker. Or On the opposite side, the flip side, they might say, I don't want this person in my group. This person go pull some slack. And based on the self-fulfilling prophecy, we will actually look for behaviors to demonstrate what we perceive. And then we had an aha moment. You know, the aha moment, yeah, you see what I tell you? I know that person was a boss. Or you see what I tell you? I know that person was a slacker. So also in individual, we must be cognizant of that self-fulfilling prophecy and how it can influence our behavior, how it can influence the group dynamics, how it can influence the whole vibe or the unity or the camaraderie amongst the group. Leadership and communication. Let's look at the context in these verbal processes. I myself would have been, as a middle manager, dealing with situations from time to time. And tell me what comes to mind, anybody, when you hear these two phrases. What I meant to say was, what I actually said was, is there a difference?
Yeah, in many instances, there is a difference between what people actually said and what they meant to say. So yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah. All right. What you heard me say and what you think I mean. What you meant to say and what you actually said. What I heard you say or what I think you mean. So when you look at these different sentences, we have to reflect that, hey, each element in the process is influenced by culture and gender. For example, we have male or female supervisors. And if your supervisor, let's say, is a female and you're the subordinate and it comes into the office and you have to treat a situation, you, based on your culture and gender lens, you might say, who she feels she is, boy, she's talking to. Because based on your culture, based on your perspective, based on your way of life, based on your belief system, that woman supposed to be the subjective sex. So we must recognize here what's going on, that differences are just that, and strive to recognize that these differences are influenced by a whole heap of factors. And we must recognize that if we want to truly gain an appreciation for others, if we truly want to gain a holistic view, if you truly want to be promote development, if we truly want to promote cooperation and coordination amongst the groups, we must recognize these key issues. In closing, understand others doesn't really mean that you agree with everything that the person say. All right? And we as leaders, we know that. But understanding others means that you firstly recognize that other persons within your group or organization, despite the hierarchy, despite the gender, despite the cultural background, they may have different views. And we must accept that it may be different from ours. But at the end of the day, we still have difficult things. We still have to do difficult things that others may not agree with. But before I leave, we must understand that, yes, we have difficult things to do. And once we create that awareness and that understanding, and we develop that skills, that both parties will understand that and move forward. So with that, I want to say thanks, class. Any questions?
No questions from me. I took notes and I was very grateful for this presentation. So thank you, and thank you to Natasha as well.
You're welcome, Jason. Thanks, class.
If no further questions, I wanna say thanks to all members of the class and my colleague Natasha who actually worked feverishly allowed myself to get this presentation together. I hope the information was put across in a manner that was relatable. At least that was the thought process behind it. And we want to say thanks for your time. And let me hand back over to Mr. Bisu. Mr. Bisu.
All right. If there are no questions, then I'll stop the recording first.